Greetings everyone, I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. The streak continues. And in this video, we are going into the 18th match Undertaker had at WrestleMania. And it is the first of his rematch period, which would carry him through this WrestleMania and the following two. It, of course, is his second WrestleMania match with Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 26 from the State Farm Arena in Glendale, Arizona. Before delving into the match itself too much, this is one of those things where people will debate on which match is better. The previous match or this one. Most of what I hear seems that most people prefer the previous one, but I could see why people would like this match, for the added drama of the streak versus career. However, I would say as a whole I preferred the previous match, but this match has its moments, a couple good spots, and then of course that ending, which does put it up there. And it also has the added benefit of Vince actually going, well, you know what, pal? Maybe we should actually put this on last. And putting it on the main event, as in the last match on the show, instead of going, well, this is going to be a main event match, but it doesn't have to go on last, pal. We could put the world title match on last. Probably a better idea. When you got Taker going against somebody, especially Mr. WrestleMania, you got to put them on last. Other ones, yeah, being on earlier, I get. Now, the build-up to this match began really at the previous WrestleMania. The whole year it was a thorn in Shawn Michaels' side. He was trying to get back at Taker, try to get him to get another match. He kept refusing a match, though. So what did HBK do? Well, he did something I've said a couple times in these videos before, and he interfered and cost Undertaker the world title. And if there's one thing you don't do, you do not cost Undertaker a world title match, because he will come back and unleash hellfire and brimstone on you. And he did, and he's also on the name the stipulation as streak versus career. And as he said in the promos, 17 men have stepped up, and 17 men have been sent down. And Shawn's retort at one point was, if I can't beat you, I have no career. So we got the bigger stakes. And because of that, it's a good thing he got the main event spot. Now, when they came to the ring, Shawn didn't really have anything super elaborate, which I guess makes sense. I mean, last year he came out in the white version of Undertaker's getup, so probably not a good idea to add more gimmick stuff to it, especially with this being his last one-on-one match. Because we all know he kind of ruined the retirement with Sweet Sidey Money. Taker came down in his hooded vest thing he started wearing around this time, which I love that look. It's a combination of Ministry Undertaker with a little bit of like American Badass influence. Which, what I mean is I could see him still wearing that as the American Badass Undertaker. Just wear it down, maybe with the hood up when he gets to the ring, then throw it down before he gets in. Now, as he came down to the ring, Michael Cole said this: Taker has defeated 10 former world champions. And that's one of those things that I'm like, 10 former world champions. And I did my little research. And technically Cole is correct. I mean, it would be 12 at that point once you count retroactive stuff into it. Because Mark Henry had not been a world champion at this time, but he would become one later that year by becoming the ECW world champion. So a little bit after this, it would be 11. And it becomes 12 if you count Snuka being a former ECW champion in there. But, a lot of people don't really talk about the ECW title before the infamous moment where Shane Douglas threw down the NWA title and proclaimed himself the ECW world champion. So it's one of those things, technically, since it's the title history, you can, but match starts off pretty good. They're going at each other. Taker, going to him. Shawn also going back. The first big spot of the match was HBK locking in the figure 4 leg lock, which he started doing a lot after his match with Flair. I mean, I don't recall him winning any big matches with it, so it's just a spot to throw in there. But then there's that also thing, how many matches did Flair win with it? Not that many that I can remember off the top of my head, but I'm sure he did win a couple things. I know he won the Intercontinental title with it. That's one I remember. Because I was watching wrestling when he did that, and it was also a big moment because it was, in his words, more gold. Of course, Taker manages to reverse out of it, and Shawn has to break it because, the whole counter thing. At another point in the match, HBK locks on the ankle lock, which is an interesting thing. He even grapevines it like Kurt Angle used to do, which is like, why would you have him do that? Is that supposed to be a shot, or am I reading too much into that? Could it just be that Shawn, from experience, as he had already wrestled Kurt a couple times by this point, was just doing a move that he knew could affect the Undertaker? I mean, Shawn knows that Undertaker did technically tap, but it wasn't from the ankle lock. If memory serves, it was from some weird triangle choke that Angle had on him using those massive thighs of his. Another point in the match, Taker goes for a last ride, but Shawn counters out of it. It's a weird looking counter, so I don't know if it was they were botching the move and then Shawn called an audible and turned it into a faceplant counter, or if that was planned. Either way, it works, and even the announcers are like, oh, did he fully counter that? Did he fully catch that? Of course, Shawn manages to recover, and he gets up to the top rope and goes for an elbow, but Taker gets his knees up, and they're writhing in pain in that. A little bit after this, Taker goes for a Hell's Gate, which he reverses into a pin attempt. Shawn does, but does not get the 3. And I don't know if what they say on commentary is correct about this, about Shawn being one of the few to get out of it that way. I wouldn't doubt it, because the first couple years that Taker was using the Hell's Gate, they really built that move up. I mean, the year that they first had it, people were bleeding from him applying it, so you can't really get a move more over than that. Shawn does eventually hit Sweet Chin Music for a near fall, and of course he goes for a second one after tuning up the band, and Taker counters this into a proper last ride for a near fall. There's some drama there, but if you're going off what happened in the previous match, there's no way Taker's gonna win with just one last ride, unless he does like a super one from the top rope or through the table or something. But it is good for a nice near fall, especially for the fans in attendance. Although there's one thing I noticed is that there was some booing here. It's like, are they booing because Taker didn't win right there? It was just weird. I'm like, really? So, I don't know, maybe there's some Shawn Michaels fans in there. I don't know. It's weird. Eventually he goes to the outside and Taker gets put on the Spanish announce table, and HBK puts him through it with a moonsault. Nice little high spot there. It's one of those ones like, ooh, it's like Spanish announce table gets destroyed yet again. Once the action goes back to the inside, Shawn does manage to hit a second Sweet Chin Music, and Taker kicks out at 2.5. This is where the match starts to really enter its peak. Like the rest of this was just set up to this part. This is the prime part of this match. Taker does counter a third Sweet Chin Music into a choke slam. And Taker, he does a pretty good selling job here, selling his leg from earlier in the match, and Shawn going after it again and again. Pick a body part and work it. The way Taker sells it, he's selling it that he can barely stand, and he's limping and hobbling as he does, and you can, with how he's selling it, it's like, is this man going to fall? This is the type of selling that Taker would start to do a little bit later on in the streak, too, where they were kind of portraying him as slightly washed up, and, like that gunslinger going out for one last ride, pardon the pun, which kind of fits then, but it's nice to see here that Taker was even selling like that then. Taker does get Shawn up for a tombstone, which he does kick out, and Taker throws what I would describe as a hissy fit, which I'll also have to ask Taker, why? You should know Shawn should be able to kick out a 1 at least, or at the very least get to the ropes. I mean, he kicked out of a tombstone the previous WrestleMania. But then again, Kane also kicked out of 2 tombstones in their first match, and he lost to 1 in their rematch. So it's like one of those weird things. Maybe that's what he's thinking. But those are also years apart, where some of Kane's monster luster had worn off. Now, of course, because of this, we don't get an equally good shot of like we did the year before, where Taker was like, there's still a weird look on Taker's face, and he starts throwing a hissy fit. But he sees Taker's probably like, what do I got to do to put this guy down? Of course, Taker pulls the straps down. Whenever a wrestler has strapped gear and he puts the straps down, you all know that means he's setting up for the end. That's what Jerry King Lawler used to do. Go for the normal pile driver or some other move. When Kurt Angle will do it, that means he's setting up for either a good angled slam or to put them in the ankle lock and actually make them tap. Here, we know he's probably going to set up for another tombstone. But Taker pauses. He starts looking at Shawn as he's doing it. There's like a look of respect, probably a little bit of pity on Taker's face at this point in the match. And he's looking at him. He's even telling Shawn, stay down. Now, before he does this, he goes to do this, but then he pauses, and that's what leads into it. But then HBK does the one thing you don't want to do to Taker when you're at his mercy, and that's slap him right across the face. Taker picks him up, jumps a little, and does what I would call a super tombstone. Although a jumping tombstone is probably a better name. For the 3, the win. The streak is retained. And Shawn must now retire. And the standing ovation the fans gave HBK after this. This is why this match deserved to go on last. Because how do you follow this? Not just from a match quality, even if it's as a whole not as good as the previous one. But how do you follow it and for the fans emotionally? How do you take them on a ride after that? You can't really. I mean, you could try, but you'd have to put a bathroom break or come down match in between it. Like, let's say if they wanted to put Batista and John Cena on last. You'd have to put another match in between it, and it's one of those things like, I'd hate to be those people following that match. And there probably still wouldn't be as big a reaction for the last match. I mean, look what happened at WrestleMania 18. They didn't put The Rock and Hogan on last. I mean, there's a whole debate like, oh, well, you're going to put a big match on that last, or you're going to put the world title match on last. It's one of those things like, And that one, they probably should have put the big match on last. The match where you didn't really need to use the title. And here they decided to do it. So I guess you could say Vince not only learned from the WrestleMania 18 mistake, but from the previous year's mistake. Of course, in a couple more years, we're going to be talking about this again. Or it's like, Vince, didn't learn your lesson. It's one of those things that, like, should the streak go on last just because it's the appeal of the streak, or should it go on first? Probably depends on the opponent, as we will get to. Overall, this is a pretty good match. Had some good moments. Early on, the match didn't really do a lot for me other than seems some good spots, but by the time we get to the third act of the match, it really is kicking into another gear, and it really does help make the match be more than just And of course, the emotional ending, Shawn having to retire and Taker retaining it, and also a little bit of build on the history between them, more so the previous match rather than their 90s history. But it's definitely another worthy entry in Undertaker's streak. Definitely one you should watch and not skip. And now, after this, the streak will continue and we'll enter the second half of the rematch period, because it will be Taker's second match with the Game.